Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host and Chief Shark Officer. If you were to consider a technology partner to your performance marketing efforts, especially one that used conversational text messages as part of your conversations with customers, it's often one of the most important considerations that's not always considered early enough, and that's compliance with regulations and guidance. So how do you go about from considering a vendor to developing a real partnership that not only performs but checks the box from a regulatory compliance standpoint, but also benefits the brand as well as makes a better customer experience? And really, what are the top considerations when introducing SMS into your marketing mix? Today, we welcome two guests to the show to explore that idea from both the brand side and the technology partner side. Pooja Amin is a corporate legal counsel at Loan Depot, and she's known as the TCPA Queenie. And we'll welcome back my friend AC Evans, who's the CEO and co-founder of Drips, a company you've heard me mention many times on this show. And on this episode, we'll discuss asynchronous conversations, tech stacks, compliance concerns with outreach, better customer experience, good stewards who don't just meet but exceed guidelines, chatbots versus conversational text messaging, partnering with your legal team, baking the rules in early, protecting the brand, going from vendor to partner, Magic and LeBron, SoCal, an obvious answer for your favorite kind of shark, and a lot more. So let's tune in to Pooja and AC with me, Mr. Shark, on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Pooja and AC, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. Pooja, starting with you, would you briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your career today?
Hi, everyone. I'm legal counsel here at Loan Depot, and I oversee all of our enterprise marketing and advertising with a special emphasis on TCPA litigation and compliance. Prior to joining Loan Depot, I handled TCPA defense for various companies across the nation.
AC, welcome back. Third time on the show. Tell us a brief introduction of yourself as well.
Hey, Kenneth, AC, co-founder and CEO of drips.com. Been in online marketing for the better part of 20 years. So I was a publisher, marketer, emailer, affiliate for years leading up to my career as a founder. And over the last 10 years or so, I've had a handful of different companies. Drips is one of them.
Outstanding. So it makes sense for us, I think, to focus most of our discussion today around some of the top considerations when introducing SMS into a marketing mix. And I think what really excites me about this also is that we're joined by a combination of powerful technologies and powerful brands with Drips and Loan Depot. So first of all, describe how this was implemented. What was the consideration that went into it, and sort of set up the use case, if you will?
Gosh, Pooja, do you remember that far back?
No.
I can help. I mean, high level. I think Loan Depot and every other enterprise in the world has experienced what we're all experiencing, which is people are picking up phone calls less and less and less, right? And I don't think that's necessarily just due to the prevalence of robodials. I think it's truly because everybody is busy, meaning everybody has something better to do. That means, trying to get a hold of them on the phone is trying to stop that person from doing whatever it is they are doing. I have a hard time getting my mom on the phone. Oftentimes I'll call her, she'll text me right back saying, "I'm busy, what's up?" And what has happened is, due to this on-demand kind of economy, is people want asynchronous conversations, right? They want to reply when they want to reply. Doesn't mean you can't remind them, doesn't mean you can't persist, but at the end of the day, just like us professionals have to schedule with each other, brands have to do something pretty similar with their consumers now.
Yeah, it's probably easier for me to schedule a podcast interview than schedule a phone call with somebody anymore. It's just sadly hard to do. But talk about, if you will, the importance of consumer outreach and how your tech stack plays into that.
Yeah, so what AC said is absolutely right? Like, text messaging is the preferred technology. And while it can be extremely powerful and an effective way to communicate with your consumers, the most important thing for me in my role from the legal department is ensuring that, before the business takes advantage of these types of technology platforms to really enhance their marketing efforts, that these tech partners understand and comply with the obvious legal requirements regarding consumer outreach. And any business using outbound dialing or texting for consumer outreach should be aware, if they're not already, of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, right, or the TCPA. And we know that the TCPA was originally designed to outlaw this technology called random or sequential generator technology. And eventually it was also expanded to prevent what we know of as robocalls or robotext. And, while the TCPA is extremely vague, one thing that it is clear on is that it applies to text messages in the same manner as phone calls, right? And companies such as Loan Depot and others can be vicariously liable for these texts and calls up to $1,500 for each sent on your behalf by third-party companies. So, for me, from my perspective, it's crucial to only work with technology platforms and partners who understand and are too compliant with the TCPA and other state laws, which in turn will help you remain reputable with your customers and obviously, keep you from legal harm.
I don't think most marketing teams would necessarily invite in a legal representative to be part of the normal everyday conversation to make it more complicated. But at the same time, you've got to have a good understanding with a good partner in order to be, especially in the environment you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. I often wear two hats, right? I had to put on my legal hat and my business hat, right? And when I'm wearing my business hat, I'm, befriending folks like AC and my other partners to make sure we're all on the same page, right? It's not marketing team's job, or it's not my business's job to do the legal work or understand the legal requirements. It's my job to tell them, hey, look, a company like Drips, they're compliant, so feel free to utilize them for your marketing efforts. It's also my job to prevent those bad actors or those vendors that don't uphold our standards to coming into our ecosystem. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Kenneth. I'm constantly wearing two hats at the same time.
Well, I've had that conversation a lot of times with digital marketers who think they're very strong in lead gen, and then they don't know a lot about compliance and regulatory affairs and things like that. And I'm walking back. I'm just from thinking that they know more than they know, because there's such regulatory complexity around lead generation anymore that you really have to have a good partner in your legal team. So AC, talk a little bit about the differences between chatbot versus conversational texting and what you're doing in that aspect with Loan Depot.
Sure. I think chatbot or push messaging, when I say push messaging, I just mean one-way texting or two-way kind of agent enablement, meaning, the loan officers can use Salesforce and do some texting back and forth. I think all of those have their place, but a lot of them, sadly, it opens up a lot of compliance risk. And that's what Pooja has to deal with all the time. And that's why we make such good partners is we bake, because we're mostly automated, we can bake all of our rules into the system, all our best practices into the system. What do you do on a holiday? What do you do at midnight? What do you do if there's a state of emergency? All this can be solved within our system. If you give somebody the opportunity to just do two-way texting, meaning again, a loan officer, and I've seen this, not at Loan Depot, at one of their competitors who doesn't use us, unfortunately, where they had some two-way texting capability. I think I've told you this story, Pooja, and I was looking at the logs, and somebody text back, said, no, I don't want to do with the refinance anymore, leave me alone type thing. And the loan officer, being a passionate salesperson, just came right back. He's like, well, did you know that, rates are at an all-time low? And what that loan officer isn't thinking about, and what their platform that they enabled wasn't solutioning for, is like that person just ignored a revocation of consent, right? So I think when you work with platforms like Drips that have a compliance first mindset, it gets rid of a lot of those problems. Chatbot, that's finite and definable, but it's mechanic, right? So most people don't want to engage with chatbots. That when I say chatbot, it means you text in and you say, hey, I'm interested in getting a loan for my house, and then the chatbot responds, we didn't understand your message. Please respond 1 if you want a quote, 2 if you want to refinance, 3 if you want something else, 4 if you want to be removed from the list. That's not a great user experience. I equate it almost to like an IVR, right? Like a multi-tiered IVR where like you press 1 and then they ask you to press 3 for this, 4 for this, and then you ask you to press 7 for this and 9 for that. You never know where it's going to end. I think humans want to engage with humans. The problem with that is it's terribly expensive, and there's a lot of quality assurance and risk that you open up if you're trying to staff out all your loan officers. Therefore, the best possible solution, in my opinion, and I'm obviously biased, is an automated, humanized chatbot that can follow rules and can, know that this is a Florida person, so only touch them 3 times, or know that it's midnight, and to not, message them back unless they ask a question, that kind of thing.
Such a great point on the revocation of consent. So Pooja, when you look at it from a legal perspective, is it less likely that you're going to be sued if you're able to communicate more in that human or humane manner, if you will?
I can't really quantify, what lawsuits, or a source, right? But, it's obvious, right? Unwanted text messaging or phone calls are the source of irritation, right? And as we talked about, the TCPA was expanded, and so much TCPA litigation has followed since to prevent these blast texts or robocalls, right? So the more frustrated a consumer becomes, likely they're going to be the folks to take legal action against you, one would think, as opposed to the ones that actually want to be contacted by you. So, keeping in mind what the TCPA puts a special emphasis on, right? And that's obtaining a consumer's consent and honoring and acknowledging opt-out requests. So, it's obviously extremely important that your business is doing that, but then also that your vendors have the systems and the technology to really perform on those requirements, right? So if you're using a chat box that's not picking up on a stop request, for instance, versus when you're texting, which the DRIPS platform, it picks up on different ban terms and different stop request terms, et cetera, you're more likely to be able to honor those opt-out requests. And, therefore you're protecting your brand, and then you're also preventing, as I mentioned, any legal repercussions as well.
Talk about that role as well that both of you play from a different standpoint of representing your brand and how you're protecting it. Because I think that's so extremely important to the consumer as well that might be engaging with your brand.
I think it's where every enterprise has to get to, right? Like if you are just pushing out, coupon codes or buy one, get ones or whatever, and it's mass blast and people didn't ask for it, like your brand is going to get damaged at the end. I always think of it as quality of conversation, right? Like if you're having the right conversation with the right people at the right time on their time, you're going to have a great consumer experience. So you can use the same channel and you can really upset the apple cart, or you can really nurture consumers for a long time asynchronously and have a great experience. I think the companies that are going to have problems, kind of going, a couple years in the future are the publishers that are trying to use this channel as a marketing channel, meaning unsolicited, right? Like 10DLC is going to put a big dent in that. Shaken's already putting a big dent in it when it comes to telemarketing, and the brokers. I think the companies that aren't necessarily they're not generating the user and they're not servicing the user. I think those two kind of groups are going to have trouble in this more transparency, privacy, like user experience being prioritized environment that we're going into. We've seen it from Facebook and iOS and Google killing cookies, iOS asking if you want to be tracked on your apps. Like I think 3% of people are saying, sure, track me, Facebook. So there's a huge push for consumer first that every company is going to have to abide by legally, and just from a sense of like what makes sense for consumerism.
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing to think that we've at least gotten to a place where people are starting to think about customer experience with the same heavy hammer, at least metaphorically speaking, to some degree. It provides a different level of respect. Pooja, how do you see that same?
I agree with everything AC said, but the biggest thing for me is contacting folks who want to be contacted, right? Avoiding that annoyance or that frustration. And, to AC's point, they are in control of when they're being contacted, what timing, when they want to stop, when they want to reach out to you. Consumers more and more are controlling their interactions with businesses, right? And I think businesses need to take that lead and follow the consumer. It's about the consumer, right? And in order to keep that engagement and have consumers coming back to you, you have to follow their lead and their wants, right? And without that, the folks are getting frustrated and your brand's going to be ruined as a result. You don't want to be deemed as that person who's constantly violating the TCPA or that company who's on, spam.com websites, right? The numbers where people are entering to get these brands blocked. You don't want to be those folks. And, a big part of that, in my opinion, a big part of that is obtaining the consent prior to reaching out. And then, as I mentioned, honoring the opt-out request as well.
Obviously takes a lot of time and money and consideration on the brand side to onboard a vendor like this or a partner. How do you really look at this to make sure that you've got the right kind of partnerships to make sure that this is a sustainable practice, Pooja?
Well, I mean, that's the very reason why I'm employed still, right? Because this stuff takes time. And as technology evolves and continues to run, we're constantly comparing it to this outdated, vague statute that was built at a time when this technology didn't exist, right? So making sure that these are platforms and folks that you want in your ecosystem takes a lot of due diligence on, my part, my legal department's part, and, the business. So continue, not only onboarding them, but also ensuring that they're continuing to stay up to date with the law, right? This is an ever change. We'll have a separate podcast on just the TCPA alone, but as most of us know, that the law is ever changing in this area, and it's extremely fast paced, as well as the technology that's coming out. So, you got to be on top of it. You got to be engaged with your partners, and you have to make sure that they are keeping up with your standards.
AC, how do you approach this same subject? How do you maintain being a good steward from a technology standpoint so that you can adhere to the law and make your customers happy and onboard them and partner with them long term?
Yeah, it's a great question. We honestly try to establish best practices that are above and beyond what is legally required, right? Like Pooja and my work through the Leads Council, we get a lot of eyes on, how all the different companies are doing their dialing cadences, what laws are coming up, consumer experience, but, candidly, like we were some of the first to do what we do. And when we were doing it, I was, trying to make sure that we were being as compliant as possible. So we baked in a lot of stuff early on. We were baking in, holidays as an example under the TSR into our system to say, like, okay, on Thanksgiving in these states, don't reach out. Pooja is a lawyer. She could tell you, I don't want to give legal opinion, but you don't have to do that if you have prior express written consent, right? Like that was something we did above and beyond to say, okay, well, if it's the third day and it's Thanksgiving, like maybe we just don't do that, right? Like even if you got prior express written consent. So there's a lot of that stuff where like we are establishing and kind of like trying to etch our names into the best practices because nobody's done this as many times as Drips has. So we have to lead, right? We can't, there's no playbook for us to follow. Therefore we have to write and build the blueprints. And then we work with experts like Pooja and Eric Troutman, our outside counsel, and all the other GCs for all the other companies that we work with, and we theory test it. We're like, well, okay, well here's the new Florida law. Just as an example, with Florida, like 3 touch points, right, within 24 hours. What if you did 2 calls and a text, and then the person asked a question? So, well, how much is it going to cost, or what are the interest rates, or can you call me now? Should you ignore that person? You know what I mean? So you have to innovate, you have to build this stuff, and you have to stand behind it, which we have. Pooja, you'd have to tell me because you diligence more vendors than I do, obviously, but I seem to see it one of 2 ways. There's either companies like ours that are trying to be thoughtful and lead with best practices and subject matter expertise around the various different compliance concerns our clients have. And then there's others who are just like, here's the keys, do whatever you want, right? Like it's software. We're not on the hook, Yeah, we're not on the hook.
Kenneth, I think AC has the tougher job, right? I'm wearing two hats. He's wearing three, right? He has to be the creative genius around what businesses such as ours needs, right? They're constantly dreaming up things as they should, right? And stay competitive in this market. And when they're dreaming up these things, folks like AC have the task of not only executing on the creative mind, but also ensuring that it's compliant. Right. And that's why it's really cool to work with companies like Drips who understand it, get it, where I can jump on the phone and just say, the business is thinking of X, Y, and Z. What are your thoughts? And then we can run it by our outside counsel, Troutman or whomever. But the initial task is really on our platforms and what they're capable of doing.
And I'll also say that we've spent a lot of money as a bootstrap startup in our early years on legal research, like building and researching these best practices, doing state by state audits. I mean, we spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure that we're building the best software we could. And for better or worse, a lot of young startup companies can't afford that kind of investment. I mean, it's just economics, right? You have to do what you can afford to do. And we knew, again, because we were performance marketers, we knew how regulated this space was. So we knew how important it was for us to have a stance. And that investment has paid off. I would absolutely say. I mean, most companies that, diligence us, big healthcare companies, big auto insurance companies, like you have to have a stance on this stuff. A young new vendor that just, built a chat bot, you can't just say, well, we don't really need to deal with CCPA, or, well, we don't have a policy for, that, or we don't know how to, you can't not be able to answer those questions if you're going to sell enterprise. Now, if you're just selling publishers, affiliates, marketers, the gunslingers, right? Like
such a great point.
Yeah, they don't care as much, so it's just, I would just say, like any other young entrepreneurs out there that are looking to get into this space, if you're going to try to sell enterprises, you have to have subject matter expertise around this, or you have to pay a lawyer to have it for you, right?
Well, shout out to TCPA's Eric Troutman,
yes,
who we've given a reference, and shout out to Rob Seaver and Leeds Counsel. So
that's right.
Thank you to both of them. So as we wind our time down, I wanted to ask, how do you continue to work together, sort of look through your planning to stay ahead of the game as all these changes come together?
I think Leeds Counsel is a huge asset to staying connected, right? And our industry, it's very tight, and we respect each other. And, we highly respect each other. And I think most of us understand that we're all very knowledgeable in this area of law and our marketing efforts, right? What we're trying to do out there. So I think just staying apprised, educated, and staying in touch is extremely important for all of us, because we're constantly learning from each other. Where, when the Florida law came out, we were all on the phone together for hours that first week, right? And that just goes to show you that each one of us in our companies want to be compliant with the law and also provide good customer service, right? That's why our businesses were built at the end of the day. So our goals are all the same. And I think that, is incredibly important for what we do every day.
Yeah, we got California, we got Virginia, we got Florida, only 47 more states to go. So you're going to be on a lot of planning meetings together with a national brand like that.
Yeah. And Kenneth, I'll add, like companies, like I'm sure AC sees competitive companies coming out and being innovated every single day, right? But if they're not apprised of this statute that's in our face every single day, then, that should be a big red flag to these businesses, right? Because the TCPA is incredibly important law. Your marketing team needs to know about them, your vendor needs to know about them, and you just got to get the noise out there. So
agreed.
And I would add for the vendor side of the house, and I would say probably for the publishers out there as well, is you have to equally remain flexible, right? Like I can't tell Pooja, to adopt my best practice. She should be like, yeah, that's cute, AC, but here's how I see it, right? And Pooja's right? Pooja's the client, Pooja is the enterprise who ultimately, it's their consumer, right? It's not a Drips. We're not reaching out saying, hey, this is Drips on behalf of Loan Depot. Like we're reaching out for Loan Depot. So you have to be equally flexible, like maybe Loan Depot wants to make a more passive, cadence, or more aggressive one, for whatever reason, who knows? But I think same with publishers. I don't know if you deal with this, Pooja, but I can imagine the publishers that work the best with you are the ones that are like, okay, well, we have to adopt their brand guideline. You can't reach out and be like, get a 0 interest mortgage rate, right? That publisher would probably crush it, on a transfer rates or whatever, but the sell through would be bad and it wouldn't be representative of your brand. So I think publishers, vendors, like we have to be willing to be flexible to the needs of the enterprise ultimately.
Great point. So as our time winds down, Pooja, I've asked AC some of these questions before. He's been on the show before. So I get to make you the next victim since they're welcoming you to the show for the first time. You're on a shark's perspective. You're in Orange County, California. Got to ask, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh, wow. I don't have a favorite shark.
Could be me. That's an acceptable
It's
answer.
Kenneth.
There you go.
Answer.
That's a great answer.
I'm already failing.
You're not at all. Pooja, it's a special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Yes.
All right. We'll see how you do with these. Magic Johnson or LeBron James? You're a gal in the LA area.
LeBron James.
Oh, we may end this show early. All right. Number 2, home loan or car loan?
Oh, wow. Home loan.
All right. Number 3, because you also went to school there, I'm asking this: San Diego or LA?
San Diego, regardless of where I went to school.
Amen to that. All right. Number 4, Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird or Paul Newman in The Verdict?
Paul Newman in The Verdict.
All right. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today that AC's answered as well, is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, man, that's tough. I got to go with the biscuits, though.
Okay.
Yep.
Pretty sure I went cornbread. I'm from the South, so either works.
That one wasn't fair, Kenneth. That's tough. I like both.
So, Pooja, where can people find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing, and more?
You can add me on LinkedIn. I think tcpaworld.com speaks of Queenie often. You can find me there, or reach out to AC. I'm sure AC has my number somewhere.
AC, same to you. Where can people get in touch with you?
I will send everybody Pooja's cell phone number. They can get a hold of me.
That's fantastic.
and you'll get 500. I'll receive $500 for each.
Yeah. No, look, drips.com is always the best place. We're putting out a ton of content. Follow us on any of the social medias. We have a very, very strong marketing team that's putting out a ton of thought leadership, and otherwise we'll be on the road here soon. We'll be at Contact, LeadsCon, and SureTech Connect. So excited to get back out there, pandemic willing.
Yeah, I will. Can I add? Drips does put out some amazing content for you folks. Want information on compliance efforts that Drips is doing. Really, really neat stuff that you guys put out, AC.
Thank you.
So there was my conversation with Pooja Amin, Corporate Legal Counsel at Loan Depot, and AC Evans, the CEO and co-founder of Drips. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with them. First, as AC said, brands all over the world are having a much more difficult time getting people on the phone. So what should they do to create an asynchronous conversation? Text messaging is a preferred method for many to most, but respecting compliance and legal guidelines is paramount. 1, it's important from the standpoint of TCPA, the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, but 2, from the standpoint of the experience of the customer. Second, as marketers continue to evolve with new technologies and expanded methods to interact with consumers, it's important to have a strong partner on your legal team. There's a lot of regulatory complexities around lead generation and how it can affect businesses of all sizes and get them in trouble if they practice the wrong method or leverage the wrong technologies. It's also good to join organizations like the Leads Council in order to better understand those best practices. Third, Pooja talked about the value they have as a partner relationship and not just looking at Drips, in this case as a vendor. And that's a requirement for her and a necessity for any business, let alone a large financial institution like Loan Depot. As AC said, they try to exceed, not just follow, established best practices. Companies like that who get it should be a real consideration for brands and performance marketers that you look at heavily, and not just what is necessarily the quick consideration that may come from price or a nice brochured featured technology play. I mean, this is really important to consider with all partner relationships. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. I'm so thankful to everyone who listens, and a special shout out and thank you to the amazing sponsors Invoca and Drips who make this show possible. Please consider writing a review. Now it's time to go out there and exhibit some of the best practices of your own. And one of those best practices is to join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.